Hello, and welcome to On Call After Hours, where we answer the questions we weren't able to get to during the broadcast portion of our show. All of your questions are important to us, and we want to answer as many as we can for you. So we have a couple more things to go over. It said, do you think that Frankenstein predicted the viability of medical transplants?
Oh, that's interesting.
It's very interesting.
But I mean, let's look at medical transplants. They've been some of the greatest advances that we've had. And if you think about fiscal responsibility, a kidney transplant, for example, is cheaper for our society than dialysis. So that if you're not counting the person, person aside, and you're just thinking money, the transplant is a better deal for society. And it's tremendously better deal for the human being.
Quality of life from not having to go to dialysis 3 times a week, that your life surrounds and revolves around that. So, yeah, I mean, that would be pretty impressive for a late teen girl to come up with in the 1800s. But
well, in some ways she did, when you think about the fact that she used different parts.
Yep.
And she had Victor use different parts of bodies to put together a whole body. So
a full body transplant.
It was a transplant.
Yep.
There were many transplants.
Total body transplant, including the head transplant, which we haven't quite
and the
gotten
brain,
there.
which was an incredible brain.
I think some people need brain transplants, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. So who knows? Maybe that'll be on call in 100 years. They'll be talking about brain transplants. We'll see.
Maybe not even 100 years. Who knows?
Who knows? So, a caller from DeSmit wants to know, how does someone in a rural community collect and save their newborn stem cells?
Ooh.
So, talk to your OB. Actually, there are kits that you can get online, and then you have to let your OB know ahead of time so they can collect the cord blood that has the stem cells in it.
And then you
In my time of delivering babies, I think I only did it once, because you have to pay a pretty hefty fee for them to freeze those stem cells and hold on to the cord blood.
Should it just be something that everybody does eventually, just part of the process?
Well,
As
I mean,
modern science sees more and more need for...
Absolutely, except...
It's
money.
It's money.
So, well, there's actually 2 different ways. You can donate the cord blood, and then it's not yours, it's being donated, just like you would donate blood.
But is there a rejection with those? I mean, the stem cells are so young, so pliable. Is there that same rejection that we see with,
I don't know. I do know that when you are keeping your own and they're being frozen for you and later use, there's very limited things that they can be used for now. So not many people do it because of the cost. Some do, like I said, flat out donate, but then you can't use them for your child later if you should need them. It was just kind of donated and goes into this mass pool. But there are ways of doing it, but you do have to let your OB or whoever's delivering the baby know beforehand, so they don't not collect the sample the correct way, because it has to be done.
If you're being delivered in DeSmit and she or he who is delivering the baby is aware and has the kit and read up on it, they can do it. I don't think it's very hard.
Oh no, it's not hard. Like I said, I
gotta
did
put
it
it-
once in residency, and that was it.
It was into dry ice, I'm sure. And of course, that stem cell, for the most part, is going to be, that collection of stem cells will be saved somewhere for a long, long time, continuously monitored for that baby as she or he grows up.
Right.
And, one day maybe that's the way we'll do it, but not yet.
But not yet. So it can be done. You just have to do a little bit of planning. If you're, pushing, now is not the time to ask your doctor, can you save the stem cells? You do need to get the kit, to have the kit, plan ahead. So it can be done. It just takes a little bit of foreplanning, and don't spring it on your doctor
The last minute.
The last minute, or while you're pushing, or right after the baby's born, because there is a few things that need to be arranged in the delivery room, just to be aware of it.
Okay.
So
Great question. I love that.
wonderful question. And I saved my favorite one for last.
Oh, okay.
So the caller says, first of all, love tonight's topic and thank you for the show. Said, at time in Shelley's book, the monster seems to be more of a human and more feeling character than Victor. How can this be related to modern science and medicine? Are there times when it is difficult to find the balance between professional detachment and personal care to those who need it?
Well, she or he is absolutely right about there are times when the monster is more human than Victor.
Yes.
And you find yourself eventually caring for that creature more than you do for Victor.
The creature becomes the hero.
And that's why my students want to name him.
Yeah.
He needs a name.
Yeah.
So yes.
But how does it correlate with uncaring nature of physicians or care providers sometimes? I think about the burned out ER person, whether they're the primary care doctor there or the nurse. And I think of through the years past when I've worked in the big cities, for example, where there were burned out care providers. I mean, they're just flat out, I have no more compassion to give. I'm going to basically take care of you. Here it is. I'm done. I've got another one right here, got another one here, and then that one dies. This one dies over here. I'm not attaching to anybody. And you can see that happen in ERs.
Does it happen just with doctors sometimes who feel, I hate to use the word arrogant but feel so arrogant that they treat their patients as lab experiments rather than as real people, real caring people. Problems to fix.
Too much work. My sense is that, of course, the compassion in a physician is probably the same amount of compassion that you would get from any college graduate group. You know, some of them are going to be bad people, some of them are going to be very compassionate, caring people. You get them in a position where they just have to go rolling through it and they don't have the time to say, I really do care. Then you can understand why that appearance of compassion may be still there, but it doesn't come off. I remember a mother who was mad at me because I didn't show compassion on her daughter who had a fractured arm. And I was thinking I was very compassionate, but and the kid was going to be all right. He just needed to get into the right sling and so on and so forth. And I'm just kind of cranking through it to expedite it so the kid doesn't have to spend long periods of time waiting for this to get on. But the mother didn't think of me as being very compassionate. And I think as a rule, I come off as a compassionate guy. I didn't come off as a compassionate person. And the answer is, I don't care how good of a doctor you are, you're going to tick off some people. And so you have to live with that too.
Yeah. And I would say it's difficult. Sometimes you have to use it as a defense mechanism, because if you have, when I was practicing in Tyndall, rural, I was running the ER, I was running the clinic, I would have days where I had a patient come in, die of a heart attack, and then I had to go right back to work. And how do you do that? I'm trying to wipe the tears from my eyes as I'm walking from the emergency room back up to the clinic, and then you have to take a deep breath and move on with your day, because the person waiting that's been sitting in their exam room for 20 minutes waiting for me down in the ER expects me to be there and compassionate for them. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you do have to use it as a defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. And if you fall apart every time something bad happens, you aren't able to function, especially in a crisis situation where things have to happen. You can't get emotionally involved. You have to stay detached and approach things systematically, go through your algorithms for treatment. If someone's, their heart stops beating, go through your ABCs of resuscitation. And then afterwards is when, if you find a traumatic experience, go to the hallway or the stairwell, and you will find the doctor most often slumped over, shocked, crying. There have been many times where I've cried after a traumatic experience with a patient, or I've had times where I've prayed with patients. And it's a very delicate thing to bring up, but when it's right, Yeah. So, and those have been some of the most rewarding and most meaningful experiences for me as a physician, when I can be there with my patient and be a real human, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry that your grandma passed away. And we did everything in our power. That rehearsed speech that you hear on TV, we did everything in our power, we're so sorry, but ultimately we weren't able to save. I mean, you hear the speech, and it sounds like a pat, canned response, because sometimes there are no good words. And so you have to fall back on
The canned words.
the canned text that you were taught in training.
I had a opportunity to answer a question of a med student when I was teaching at Emory, and the question was, right after we had a patient who had cancer, and we had to tell them, and I had the med student tell the patient, and then I was there in the room and then gave the support, and then the question came, you've got to tell us how to do this, and so they asked me to give this talk on how to tell people bad news, and I went through all the literature, and the answer is, it doesn't really, the words don't matter so much as whether if you care or not, and they can hear if you care, most of the time. Most of the time.
Yeah, it definitely is hard with giving bad news. That's the worst part, and trust me when I say, when we open those pathology reports or we read the note from the surgeon and we find that there is cancer, our heart grieves just as much. We feel just as bad because we want our patients to get better and we want them to be healthy. And the last thing we want is something bad, because one thing I hate is Sunday morning in church prayer requests. And then I'll hear a diagnosis like pancreatic cancer, and I'll go, oh.
You know.
I know what they're going to be going through. I know what the statistics are. I know how bad it can be. And I know it will literally take a miracle for something good to come, for a good outcome to happen.
But sometimes miracles do happen.
And sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do.
But it's a very hard thing. Know that we as physicians, there are times when we stay up. I know I've been times where I have stayed up all night thinking about what I did, what could I have done differently, what is going to be the best thing, going back to books, reading textbooks, calling old med school classmates, calling old professors. What do I do? How can I help this patient? So it's not a 9-to-5 job. When we go home, the doctor's still working, and we're still trying to do everything we can in our power. And if it seems like we're not, it's because we have exhausted ourselves to the point that we can't care. And that's something Avera's working at, is trying to teach doctors how to care for themselves so we can be better doctors, because we can't be nurturing, helpful, compassionate people if we are chronically exhausted and wearing and not taking care of ourselves and our souls.
And beating ourselves up for...
And beating ourselves up, exactly. So how do we forgive ourselves for when things don't happen right? Because everyone dies. And every doctor thinks we're going to keep a patient alive. And sometimes in training you say, I don't want them to die on my watch. Yeah, when the next person comes on, they can die. That's okay.
Yeah.
But I kept them alive for these 24 hours, and
Yeah.
it's all about guilt. There's a lot of guilt when someone dies.
When you become an old doctor, like somebody I know, and you've done all the good that you've tried to do, and then somebody's lymph node that you should have biopsied that you didn't, and then it was cancer. And then you didn't catch, then there's the sleepless nights for me. Mm-hmm. What should I know I should have. It's called the shoulda disease. Mm-hmm. So.
Yep, that hindsight, that's 2020.
Yeah,
so.
There we go.
So a little off topic, but.
Is that our last question?
That was our last question.
And I would, as a guest, just say to you and to Becky how much I appreciated the two of you being on and doing this. What a great show it was. I just loved it.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on our website. We appreciate all your questions and the opportunity to answer them. Be sure to join us next week on South Dakota Public Broadcasting at our regular time, and call in your question or email your questions. Then watch for our columns in your local newspaper. Listen to our Prairie Doc Conversations radio show on a station near you, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, stay healthy, people.